From the News Channel 5 network, this is OpenLine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine. I am Ben Hall. Good show tonight. A big day in the Tennessee legislature. A lot of important things have been happening this year, and certainly today, the Improve Act passed, the gasoline tax. We want to talk about that. We want to talk about what's going on in the legislature. Very happy to have with us someone who can help explain all of that, Senate Majority Leader Mark Norris. Thank you for being with us, Senator.
My pleasure, Ben. Thank you.
Republican from Collierville. Again, I'm very glad you're here, and this was a big day. As you went into this day with the Improve Act, this is a tax cut, the gasoline tax increase. What were your thoughts? Did you think it was going to pass? Where were you as you went in today?
I've always been optimistic that the General Assembly would do the right thing and help us reinvest in the future of Tennessee for all Tennesseans. I did not know whether the House of Representatives today would be able to get the job done. There were by far the majority of very conscientious, thoughtful, and brave representatives who tackled that task, and it passed overwhelmingly, really. I think 60 members voted for the measure. And so we were able actually to take it up this afternoon in the Senate, and it passed with an overwhelming majority there as well. So at the beginning of the day, I didn't know if today would be the day, but I'm very proud that it was tonight.
And why do you think in the House that happened? Why was there was some question in the morning, and then all of a sudden it passes fairly overwhelmingly? What happened there?
Well, the sponsor of the measure in the House, Barry Doss, just did an outstanding job of telling the truth and setting the record straight about this as what I called the continuum of tax cuts. This was our sixth major tax initiative since 2011 and our largest single tax cut in history. We started back in 2011 cutting a number of taxes, and I've been fortunate to be the sponsor of these tax cuts. I repealed the gift tax, I killed the death tax, began the reduction in sales tax on food at the time, the so-called Hall tax, that income tax on dividends and interest, the march towards the ultimate repeal. We did 1% in the current year. But what we did today includes a 20% reduction in the sales tax on food. People have complained about there being any sales tax on food for years, Ben, and today we made a 20% cut, takes it down to 4%, which is going to be very beneficial to all Tennesseans. At the same time, we reallocated remaining revenues to readjust our priorities. And for those user fees, which they really are, at the pump, began to phase in a gradual increase of 6 cents over the next 3 years on gasoline sales and 10 cents over the next 3 years on diesel sales. These adjustments are going to make it possible for us to accelerate the pace of repairs, road building, but very importantly, replacement of dangerous bridges in the state of Tennessee. Over 500 of these bridges are posted, which means they're weight restricted, which in a word means they're dangerous. My research across the state found so many structures that are not safe for school buses to cross, are impossible for firefighting equipment to cross, impossible for farmers to get their heavy machinery in to harvest crops, or their 18-wheelers out with the harvested crops. It's like some kind of third world country.
Well, we've seen some crazy stuff happening in Atlanta with the roads buckling and one kind of crashing down there.
On I-85.
So are people aware? What you're describing is somewhat of third world country type stuff.
Well,
are we going to be able to get it out there soon enough to do something about it?
Yes, and to your first question, are they aware? Not sufficiently aware, unless they're in these areas that are underserved, areas where they worry whether their children will return safely from school at night, where they don't have assurance that the fire engine could get to their home if it's a flame. And it takes the kind of leadership that tells the truth and isn't afraid to deal with the truth. So initially, Governor Haslam had a different proposal, the so-called Improve Act, and that was not going to pass. And he worked with me when I told him that, in my judgment, it would not pass, to make it a better bill and to really turn it into a true tax cut. In other words, what Governor Haslam originally had in mind was revenue neutral for the state as a whole, and we wanted to make it a tax cut for Tennesseans individually. And so now, through a number of mechanisms, I like to say that Tennesseans will save more at the store than they pay at the pump. And you can use different numbers. Are you talking about a family of 4 with 2 cars, or a family of 2 with 1 car? And there are different averages. Different people drive different distances, and we debated that, and I understand the difference. But in rough round numbers, one may pay $30 more a year for gasoline under this law, but they'll save $50 more a year at the store. In other words, they're going to have a $20 bill left in their pocket with $10 billion worth of important road and bridge projects. It's not a bad deal.
When you start talking about a tax increase of any kind,
oh yeah,
people are very uncomfortable by that. I mean, we've had calls on the show, no tax increase, and they've been opposed to the gas tax. You saw that, I guess, in the beginning. This bill wasn't going to pass.
Correct. Because net, it didn't put any money back in Tennesseans' pocket. You've heard a lot about the surplus, and every time somebody would pontificate about the surplus, the numbers would go up. You know, first it was $1 billion, then it was $2 billion. I heard somebody in the House today say $4 billion. Paul Didash. We have had several years of excess revenues. Those revenues belong to Tennesseans. They're not ours to play with. And so if people were pained by these excess revenues, my mantra was, well, let's give it back. Return it. Let Tennesseans keep that money in the first place. Why are we collecting it? There was an alternative proposal by Representative David Hawk in the House, where he simply wanted to reshuffle the deck and dip in to the general fund and use that to pay for some of these transportation projects. A couple of problems there. You're not giving any of the money back or letting Tennesseans keep their money in the first place. No tax cuts. It was all reshuffle the deck. Secondly, so much of the revenue at the pump comes from out-of-staters, non-Tennesseans, truckers, tourists, transients, as one of my friends in the House said. So about 50% of the revenue on diesel comes from out of state. Why put that on the back of Tennessee taxpayers? Somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% of the gas tax revenues come from folks just passing through, not Tennesseans. So this notion that we could just raid the general fund and put it on the backs of the Tennessee taxpayers was misguided.
I mean, I've been around for a while, and there have been years where we have a big shortfall, and there's always this question. I mean, for a long time ago, there was a question: do we need an income tax? Do we need to raise revenue? You're saying, I guess, that we've had years that are good enough that we do have an overflow. Yeah. We have some extra money. Right. Because when you tell me this is a net increase for the taxpayer, it's a net tax cut.
Net tax cut.
Then my question is, okay, what in government is being cut? If we're taking in less money than we're bringing in, then what then is cut?
So through a number of mechanisms, changes, initiatives since 2011. We've been able to reduce the size of government. We've been able to reduce the number of employees. We've been able to cut down on some of the facilities. And then as to the facilities we have, reduce costs in facilities management. It's been through very shrewd and conservative budgeting that we've begun to realize these revenues. And you know, we Republicans like to talk about conservative business principles. What business do you know that you'd want to see running in the red? I've been amazed since January to hear some Republicans just complaining about the surplus as though it's a bad thing. We've done good work. And yet I've come to realize that probably 60% of the folks in the General Assembly weren't here when we didn't have sufficient revenues to meet expenses. They look at this as some kind of fountain of youth, that it's a wellspring from which additional revenues will always flow, and that's not the case. We will see soon enough the economy cool and revenues turn down. I don't have it with me tonight, but there was an article in the press over the weekend about some faltering sales figures and already some declines in revenues associated with the sale of cars and houses. Well, those are always the first two sectors to begin to falter. It's cyclical. We're going to come back to another recession. It's as inevitable as, you know, night follows day.
You always see it. So where does this leave us when that happens?
In a much better place, because rather than raiding the general fund, from which we have to meet our annual operating expenses, we've used a dedicated fund, and that is the transportation fund for gas and diesel. Dedicated revenues paid largely by folks other than Tennesseans. And that will enable us to manage the money that we actually do have coming in from the taxpayers in a very responsible way in which we can live within our means. If you rely on erratic sales taxes only, and that bridge is halfway built, what happens when the bottom falls out? Well, you stop building the bridge. They become bridges to nowhere. That's no way to run a government. That's not responsible. We're debt-free. We don't borrow money for roads. We have the lowest debt per capita, the lowest tax per capita of any state in the nation. And even after these adjustments and these reallocations and these refunds, if you will, these tax cuts, we'll still be the lowest tax state in the nation. It's a good place to be.
All right, we're going to take a break. If you want to call in, the lines are open. 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.